Fell Demon Hunter is nearing its final form, and while it looks like the refinement phase for Fell Demon Hunter is almost complete, there's still 2 Fell Demon Hunter lists that are actually competing for supremacy. I'm Uncorrupt, and I'm going to go over each list with you to give you the pros and cons. The first list I want to take a look at with you is actually the Quest Fell Demon Hunter list. The defining feature of this list is, of course, the quest itself. And what the quest allows us to be able to do with this list is it gives us an extra way to be able to discount the mana cost of some of the cards that we're going to be drawing. Now what you're going to notice is with both of these Fell Demon Hunter lists, they're both going to be running the Relic package, although there is a slight difference in that as well that I'm going to get to just a little bit later. But Relic Vault and Relic of Dimensions, I'm sure you've seen it before. You can draw 4 cards. Those cards can be absolutely free. And in addition to that, with this particular list, we also have the mana discount that goes along with the quest. One other note about the quest here, it's going to be pretty rare that you're actually going to be trying to complete part 3 of the quest and play the Crest Lord. There are some games where that's going to be the best possible thing that you can do, but in most cases, you really just want to complete part 1, complete part 2, take those mana discounts, apply them to those cards, and then probably look for a really big OTK kill with that. Cruising on down the list here, of course, Relic Package, as I mentioned, is in the list, but you're going to notice there's no Zymox at the top end of the list, so we really don't have that big payoff for the Relic Package. And the Relic Package, for the most part, it really just revolves around Relic of Dimensions, the card draw, and being able to discount the other cards that are in the deck by a really large amount, so we can play lots of cards in a single turn. Unleash Fell, absolutely a key card in both lists. This card allows us to clear the board with some of the spell power minions that we have packed in the deck, and it gives us a big heal. Early in the game, you're not really worried about taking chip damage from your opponent. They can get you down to 15, 12, 10 health, and actually in one turn with a couple of spell power minions and an Unleash Fell, we're able to heal up our entire board as well as deal big damage to our opponent's face. And to go along with that, once those spell power minions are down, we play the Unleash Fell, we've cleared the board, and now we have spell power minions that are buffing Fell Barrage. I had a game where our opponent was actually able to have no less than 3 of the spell power minions on the board. This made the Fell Barrage do 8 damage to the lowest health target. They had already cleared my board with the Unleash Fell and healed back to full. And I took 8, followed by 8, and then the second Fell Barrage was another 8. So I took 32 damage from 2 Fell Barrages, all for very, very low mana cost because of Relic of Dimensions and the quest itself. Another thing you're going to notice here with this version of the list, it's chock full of card draw, which is both good and bad. There has to be a lot of card draw if we're going to be able to complete 2 parts of the quest at a minimum. And so we've included Spectral Sights in the list. This is a way to just be able to complete the quest and get more cards in our hand. Now the reason why I say that that's bad is because sometimes your hand just gets clunky. Sometimes your hand gets really full, and if you have not been able to play a Relic of Dimensions, you're paying near full cost for all of the cards that are in your hand, and then it can be a little bit challenging to be able to dump your hand so that you can play a Vault Relic of Dimensions to refill your hand with basically free cards to be able to get these really big power spike turns. So that's definitely a drawback. And then this list also puts you in situations where you just don't know what to do. I feel like this list is going to have to be played a lot in order for any player to really be able to optimize their decision making as far as what to do. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, sometimes you look at your hand and your hand does nothing. You can maybe draw a card, you can maybe trade a card, and then you're just hoping that what you draw or what you trade into is going to be more card draw or another trade to be able to finish a part of the quest. And if you actually brick on that, then you start to fall behind because you have multiple turns where you're basically AFK, not doing anything, and you're not getting the mana discounts you need to really make this list go. Another drawback of the list, I mentioned before, there is no Zymox at the top end of the list, so that kind of limits what we can do with our Relic of Phantasms. As we play these, it's mostly just going to be to buff the Relic of Dimensions, but we're not going to have a turn where we lay down the big 8/8, and it's going to clear the other side of the board with a Relic of Extinction, and it's going to draw additional cards and discount them, and it's going to play an additional Relic of Phantasm. So with no Zymox, it does limit the potential a little bit of the Relic package in this list. Now, a positive of this list, we're actually not running Souleater Scythe. You're going to notice that there's actually 6 minions in the list. We're running a Viper to be able to deal with Paladins and potentially Rogues in any class where a weapon is going to be really harmful to us. There's 4 spell power minions here between Silvermoon Arcanist and the Guild Trader. And then, of course, the Jace Darkweaver. Running or not running the weapon in this list is actually a pro because with all these minions in the deck, that means they can be discounted, and that's where you're seeing these really big power spike turns. So it's not necessarily going to be extremely rare that you might be able to discount Jace. You could discount 2 or 3 of these spell power minions, and then in one turn you're playing spell power minions, clear the board, unleash Fel, do a bunch of damage, face Fel Barrage, and then replay all of your Fel spells with the Jace here, and you just find lethal. It's an insane amount of damage in a single turn. So this list definitely has a higher damage potential than the other lists, but in my opinion, because of the nature of the quest and all of the card draw that we're having to run here, it also has a higher brick potential. So in my mind, there's maybe a little bit of question about the consistency of this deck, but I will say, based on the data that's available as of the time I'm making this video, this list looks like it has a little bit higher potential, a maybe 1 to 2% higher win rate, but it's still a little bit early. There's still a lot of data that needs to come in, and it looks like the list might actually be moving closer together, and we could end up in a situation where these two competing lists actually have roughly the same win rate. It's definitely going to be something that we're going to have to keep an eye on. The other version of the list that we're going to take a look at is actually going to be this Souleater's Scythe version. So we're not going to be running a quest in this version. We are running the Scythe, which means that we're going to limit it to just 3 minions in this version of the list. 3 minions are going to be Jace, of course, to repeat all our Fel spells. We are running Zymox, so this list does have a stronger relic package than the other list. And then we're also just going to be running 1 Silvermoon Arcanist. This is going to give us plus spell damage. So, again, the pros and cons of the two lists. It's a pro that we don't actually have these minions in our hand or in our deck. At the beginning of the game, the Souleater Scythe is going to turn these into 1-mana spells where we can discover the minion that we need. Now that's good because that means we don't have the minions in hand or in deck. That means that those minions are going to be safe from things like a Patchwork, things like a Mutinous, things like a Plague Spreader, anything that could change that card or destroy that card in our hand or in our deck, or even Theatar. Some people are still playing Theatar out there. Those minions are safe. And then we're going to have 3 of those 1-mana spells to be able to discover these minions. As soon as you draw 1 of those, you can then discover the minion that you need when you need it. So for example, maybe we want to discover Zymox because we're getting ready to play a Feldori Warband, and then those 4 minions actually charging in and dying as we're clearing our opponent's board, we're also able to infuse our Zymox. So it kind of gives us a way to get exactly what we need. Sometimes we might exactly need our spell power so that we can unleash Fel and get a big heal. So we can discover that. It's kind of like on demand. Now this is also a con when compared to the other list. The bad part of that is, because these minions are not in our deck, and because they're attached to a 1-mana spell, we're always going to be paying full price for Jace, Zymox, and the spell power. So we could potentially discount the cost of those Bound Soul spells to be 0 so that our Discover is free, but we're still going to have to pay full cost for the minion itself. That is a drawback, so there's a plus there and a minus there for each deck when you start to consider the two decks side by side. One thing that this deck does do a little bit better as well, with Mark of Scorn, because we have 0 minions in the deck thanks to the Souleater Scythe, that means that the Mark of Scorn is going to be guaranteed to do damage because it's going to be guaranteed to not draw a minion. That's definitely comforting. With the other list, you don't necessarily have that guarantee. And one quick note here about Mark of Scorn: if your deck is empty and you're in fatigue, it's never going to deal damage because there is no card to actually draw. So just keep that in mind. You might find yourself in a spot with an empty deck. Just know this is not going to deal damage. Another pro for this list, it has just a little bit more healing in some ways and maybe a little bit less healing in other ways. So again, just a pro and a con. So we still have Unleash Fel, but we don't have as much spell power to be able to clear a big board and to be able to get that big heal while we're doing it. But you're going to see that this list is also running 2 copies of Deal with the Devil, so we're going to be able to summon at 3 3/3s with Lifesteal. And then we're also running the Eldrazi Warblades. It's going to allow us to be able to heal off of things like Chaos Strike and Fury once we have it. And then, of course, we have 2 swings to be able to do that. So again, could potentially be like some on-demand healing. With the other list, you kind of have to save your Unleash Fels, make sure that you have your spell power, make sure that your opponent has a board. Whereas with this list, yes, you do have that same option, but with the Eldrazi Warblade, you could play that. You could play, in addition to Fury and a Chaos Strike, now you're able to get a decent heal out of your weapon as well as a decent heal on the next turn. So the two lists, they share a lot of similarities. There's also a lot of differences between the two lists and the way that they play. I feel like this list is a little bit more consistent, but it doesn't have as high of a potential to be able to do those insane damage turns. You know you're always going to be paying full price for the Jace, So you're probably going to want to play most of your spells before you actually play the Jace, or at the very least, you're going to want to make sure that you have lethal when you play the Jace. The other list, you probably don't even have to count because you're able to play so many fell spells in the same turn, and then potentially a Jace also in that same turn, and the damage is just off the charts. With this particular list, probably going to have to be a little bit more careful and a little bit more calculating to make sure that we're actually able to hit lethal. Which list is best? That's going to be hard to say. The quest list is definitely harder to play. I think it's going to take significantly longer to master. In my play on the ladder, I've seen some very, very good players appear to be struggling with the list, and I don't know if that's necessarily because it takes longer to learn the list, or if maybe because the list just isn't as consistent as this fell list is. As far as my personal choice of which one I think is the best, I'm getting ready to queue up a game, and I'm going to show you. So which one is my preferred list? It's actually the Souleater Scythe version. Partially because I've experimented with both lists, and the quest version, for me, it's just a little bit inconsistent. It could be a player skill issue. I might have to play that deck significantly more. But I find that the quest list is actually harder to play. I would never discourage you from giving it a try. If you want to give it a try, be sure and do that. But if you play it and feel like it's inconsistent, or maybe it's a little bit harder than what you're looking for in a deck, don't worry about it. Just play the other list. That's what I do. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Also, one thing I forgot to mention is this list is actually running Kurtrus and the other list doesn't. So again, that's just another difference between the list. We're going to keep Relic Vault and Relic of Dimensions here. This is just absolutely great. This combination of cards actually makes both lists go round. We don't actually want both Relic Vaults in our hand, I don't think. But it is what it is. Could be a positive. You know, we could play one on turn 2 is what we're going to be doing. And then we could use it. For example, if we hit another Relic, we could use one on turn 4 and have the other one available for turn 5 with the Relic of Dimensions, whatever the case may be. No real option here. We're just going to hero power and go face. Up against Rogue, it's just as likely to be Death Rattle Rogue as it is Miracle Rogue in my experience. I'm facing a lot of Death Rattle Rogues, and that's definitely going to be a tough matchup for us. No indication just yet of what we're up against as far as our opponent. And this is just going to be a straightforward, we just want to go ahead and get the Relic Vault out onto the board here, and we'll pass back to our opponent. We potentially top deck a Relic of Phantasms. That's going to be our turn 3 play, so we want to make sure that our Relic is in play and ready to go. Relic Vault, that is. That way it's there when we need it. Still looking for an indication of what our opponent's game plan is, and again, just nothing yet. They have no kept cards from the mulligan. So at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and Mark of Scorn and draw a card here. So again, with this list, we're guaranteed to be able to draw that card. And we hit Relic of Extinction. I'm going to hero power and then pass it back to our opponent, buffing our Kurtrus. So on turn 4, we can actually play the second vault. We can go vault this, even if it's an empty board, to be able to set up second vault Dimensions to be able to get a bunch of cheaper cards on turn 5. Seems like it's going to be pretty straightforward. If our opponent develops something, it's likely we'll be able to remove it. If they don't develop it, we're going to do this anyway, because it's going to get 2 cards out of our hands to free up hand space, and it's going to buff our Relic of Dimensions. And that's going to be exactly what we're going to do here. So we're going to go ahead and use this. We're going to throw this guy out. Again, still no indication of what our opponent is trying to do. And then we're just going to hero power and swing into our opponent's face. So next turn, it looks like we're going to draw our 7th card into our hand. So we're going to play this, which is going to take us down to 6. So we'll be able to hold those 4 cards. And we'll make some decisions there about what we need to do to get an additional card out of our hand so that we don't overdraw the next turn. Most likely we'll be able to do something cheap. Worst case scenario, we can just go Coin Fury. Looks like our opponent is actually going to be playing Death Rattle here. Death Rattle is capable of putting up some really big taunts, as I'm sure you've seen with the Burning Blade Acolytes. Those 5/8s that come off of that Death Rattle are pretty significant. And we actually hit Relic of Phantasm, so this is going to be really good here. Next turn, we'll be able to use this Vault and this Relic of Phantasms, and those minions are going to be huge. Hopefully our opponent doesn't do too much on this following turn. But we're just going to go ahead and get our free cards, I think, here. Or mostly free. So you can see here we get the cheap get a couple of cheap things. And we've got a bound soul here as well, so whenever we decide we need a minion, we're going to have access to it. For example, next turn, maybe I want to go ahead and get the Zymox in my hand, and then that way with the minions that are created by the Phantasms and possibly this Feldori Warband, I can guarantee that it's actually going to be... Guarantee that it's actually going to be free. I need to get the coin out of my hand. I kind of don't want to, but I don't necessarily feel like I can take the overdraw here. And I'm just going to play the Sigil and Hero Power Face. So if you just play the Sigil, then you would actually draw 2 cards and still overdraw 1. I was considering playing the Fury and then just taking a swing at my opponent's face. I don't necessarily feel like there's a reason to do that, though. I'm going to hold on to that Fury. We may need it to clear a minion on the board, or we may want it with the Aldraki Warblades in case we need to heal. We're going to be able to get 2 5/5s and 2 6/6s on the board with this. Again, we can discover the Zymox if we need to, and we've got the cheap Feldori Warband. And this works out really well for us. So we'll be able to Warband the 4/4, and then with the 4/1/1s, we'll be able to kill this, so then this Death Rattle does not have a minion to land on. So this is really good, and we have both Unleash Fells. Things are looking pretty good. I want to make sure that I use the Warband first, and I want to make sure that I kill this guy first. But before that, let me go ahead and get the Zymox. We're going to make sure that we get him infused. And then just make sure that I kill these in the right order. It totally negates this Death Rattle. And then it's going to allow us to be able to get really good sized minions on the board here as well. I'm going to go ahead and Chaos Strike. That's what we're going to be using the rest of our mana on this turn anyway. We pick up a Relic of Extinction. And then we're going to go ahead and get our big minions into play. And we're going to make sure we remember to swing face here. So things looking pretty good so far. Our opponent can still put up a nice big wall of taunts against us, but we're going to have a way to be able to clear them with Vault Extinction, and then on turn 8 we're likely just going to be dropping down the Zymox. Snowfall Graveyard for our opponent. And let's see what Death Rattle minion they're going to be playing here. Burning Blade Acolyte, so they are going to get 2 5/8s on the board. In addition to having a 4/4 that's going to generate even more 5/8s. So, the question now is, what's going to be the best way to deal with these? Those do 6 damage. We could hit, play this. And then we can hit here. Play the Relic of Extinction, and we'll be able to clear off... Ooh, we can't quite... Yeah, we can clear it off with the Relic Vault, so we can clear his board. To figure out the best way to do this. We don't have another bound soul. Alright, I'm going to hit here. We're going to get down the Kurtrus. This is going to allow us to be able to push 6 face as well. So we'll hit there. We'll hit there. Go face. Boom. And then we're going to play our Relic of Extinction. So this is going to clear the board. It allows us to still keep these 2 minions in play. Next turn, we're likely going to Zymox. It's going to be more damage, it's going to draw more cards to be discounted, and it's going to give us 2 additional really big minions here, so that's going to be all good things going in our favor. At some point, we're going to want to go ahead and play these other cheap Fel spells that we have, so that when we are able to hit another bound soul, we'll be able to get the Jason hand, we'll be able to replay all of those. Our opponent is going to have access to more Burning Blade Acolytes, though, so they're going to have access to taunts, but this kind of puts them in a tough spot because they need to proc their own Death Rattle to be able to get those taunts in the way. If they can't block these minions, then we just kill them with the hero powers here. So we're in a pretty good spot this game. We're going to have to see what our opponent does next, but they're going to need a wall of taunts to prevent us from being able to get to their face. And we have a lot of damage, 8, 10. We have a lot of damage from hand just with these cheap fell spells. So our opponent, there's an illusionist. And maybe a little bit of a order error here, but that's actually just going to be the game. We don't even have to play the Zodmox, so we're just going to go ahead and kill our opponent with these fell spells. And there you have it. Again, I feel like this list is just a little bit easier to play. It's possibly a little bit more consistent. I would encourage you to get out and play both lists if that's what you want to do. If you find that one is harder than the other one, again, I would suggest just don't worry about it. I'm Uncorrupt. Thank you for watching, and good luck out on the ladder.